And it looks like we are live, guys. Give me just a second here so I can get in our wonderful Facebook groups. Got to get everybody here in the Mile High Huddle community in here on a wonderful Friday evening for some Dove Valley deep divers. Give me a second here. We do got green check marks across all platforms. Mile High hello, everybody in Broncos country. Welcome into another episode of the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. I am your host, Lance Sanderson, and joining me, as per usual, is my good friend and colleague. He is Mile High Huddle's senior NFL draft analyst, the one and only Erick Trickel. Erick, dude, we're now officially through OTAs. The offseason program has pretty much kind of ceased to exist and finalized everything going that way. If we got about 6 weeks before training camp starts here near the end of July, probably around the 26th or 27th, something like that. We don't know exactly yet. We can kind of get a close destination, but training camp's coming up here soon, man. It's the season of the list. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm getting back into the swing of things really with getting articles up. Kevin Gray came in and said, haven't read much from Nick and Eric. Should that their articles are great. First of all, thank you for that. But part of the reason for that is Nick and I haven't put us in a whole lot. Nick, during the summer, he does a lot of his hiking and camping stuff, which takes up a lot of his time. And me, it's just been getting back into the swing of things. There's been a lot of stuff going on. But I do have a couple articles that went up today. One of them is talking about, is the wide receiver room, is it great? Is it overrated? Is it still unknown? And I kind of make my case there about how the wide receiver room kind of looks at the moment. I have my series that's going on right now about tiering each of the positions, about who's with each player at each position, about who's most likely to make the roster. That's going to end here probably in 2 weeks or so. So make sure you guys go check that out. Other than that, things are going great. Summer's going decent. It's been nice and rainy up here, which unfortunately sucks. Not much time to go out and get outside. And it especially sucks when you have a almost 6-year-old birthday coming up here in just a little under 2 weeks. And she wants to go do something outside, and you can never bet on the weather in Alaska. The weather up here can change at a moment's notice, and sometimes it just sucks.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit before we went live, and like living here, central Wyoming, you never know what you're going to get with the weather here either. We got some super chats we're going to get to here in just a second, guys, but you never know what you're going to get with the weather, especially May, June, going into July is where things really kind of finalize, getting hot and stuff like that. Last year at this time, it was 95 degrees every day, the sun beating down on you, and we never saw a drop of rain. This month, from about the middle of May through now here in June, we have been about 70 degrees damn near every single day. We had a couple get up towards the 80s, but it's like every other day we get rain. And that just never happens around here. So it's been kind of interesting. Last night we got 1.5 inches of rain overnight. It rained all morning long. It was kind of a miserable, super cloudy day until the tail end of it. So I definitely understand with that, especially this weekend. Father's Day obviously coming up around the corner. I have a few plans. I hope everybody has a great weekend before we get into that. Let's jump into some of these comments here. We got David McElrath jumping in here. Papa Bear, what's up, dude? He jumping in here before the show even got started with the $5 super chat. Thank you for that, David. We appreciate you. Good evening, Broncos country. Lance, Eric, Dylan, and Deacon Scott. Hashtag MHH for life. Hashtag Buckham 3 times with a B. And hashtag Denver Broncos for life. Thank you, Papa Bear. We appreciate that, man. It's always good to see your face here. We don't have Scott with us tonight. Dylan is in the chat moderating some stuff. So thank you to Dylan for joining us tonight. Thank you all for joining us here on a wonderful episode of the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. Up next, we got James Richard, $2 super chat. What's the deal, Pickle? You're late. I'm not sure what that necessarily means, but
I'm curious. If it's a pickle, trickle. That was a thing I heard a lot in school. That's one thing to think of. But if that is, and you're talking to us about being late, we don't start till 4, and every now and then we have to wait a little bit for whatever issues. And this was for my time, and he sent this in 12 minutes prior, so wasn't that we were late? Just hadn't hit that time yet. And then we have one more super chat here coming in. Troy Boer with the wonderful golden retriever, as Nick always likes to comment on. Says, hey guys, if Brandon Johnson is as good as everyone says and would never clear waivers, what do you think the Broncos do? Well, first of all, I always ignore so-and-so won't clear waivers during training camp in the preseason. Because every year, there's always like those 4 guys that, they'll never clear waivers. They get cut, clear waivers, and they're back on the practice squad. Every year. Brandon Johnson, he has a chance to make the roster still, but this receiver position is it's kind of stacked. I actually have my article up talking about the tiers of it on it, and he's in the third tier because you have 4 guys at this point that are essentially set to make it. And then you have Marquez Callaway, who I think is the favorite of the next group of 4 to make the roster. Mm-hmm. And then you have KJ Hamler, Jalen Virgil, and Kendall Hinton all there. Mm-hmm. And Brandon Johnson, he's much of the same of what you have with some of these other receivers. Jalen Virgil, KJ Hamler, they bring some of the explosive playmaking ability that you wouldn't have on the roster outside of Marvin Mims. Kendall Hinton has his reliability there, even though he's a little bit smaller. So I'm not sure where Brandon Johnson fits on the roster unless he really takes a step forward. Because last year when he saw the field, he had that great preseason, of course.
Oh, yeah.
But when he saw the field in the regular season, it wasn't all that great. There were multiple miscommunications on his end when it came to catching passes from Russell Wilson. There was one play, I can't remember which game it was exactly, maybe you can, where from off the snap, he's kind of like just jogging through his route.
Oh, that was against Kansas City. I know exactly the play you're talking about. Towards the end of the season, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it was towards the end. It was towards the end of the season. He's just kind of jogging his route, and the ball gets thrown like 10 yards in front of him because it was a timing route, and that's where he was supposed to be, but he wasn't there. Mm-hmm. So like, got a lot to work on. He definitely had a great preseason. He's one of the guys that I'm keeping an eye on. But I think practice squad is more likely. I'm not worried if he would clear waivers or not, especially at this point.
I want to tap into that point just a little bit here. And a big reason why I'm never really worried about that, if they don't clear waivers, whatever, that means you lost a player that's going to go sit on the bottom end of the roster on some other team, essentially, is what you've just done. The reason why you don't see that happen very often, I mean, the Broncos have done it before. They got Deontay Spencer a couple of seasons ago from Pittsburgh on that kind of a deal, picking him up off of waivers. Teams want these players that know their systems, that have been with the offseason program, they've been with it, they have some continuity, at least a little bit, with the team throughout the training camp, throughout the offseason program, and going back to when they signed. They have that familiarity with the system. They want these guys to stick around. So if they have a major issue, like say, hypothetically speaking, let's go back to last season here. Tim Patrick tore his ACL and the Broncos needed another wide receiver because they had another receiver go down with an injury. Then maybe you would see them bring in a wide receiver from somebody else. Typically what they're going to do is they're going to really focus on the guys that they have, or even go back to a guy that they had in the offseason program that was at least around the team a little bit more than they're going to go and try to find somebody from another roster. Or if they do find somebody from another roster, there's probably going to be a guy that has some familiarity with somebody in the coaching staff or some familiarity with somebody in the locker room. So that's why I don't necessarily pay any attention to guys that are like, everyone's like, oh, he's not going to clear waivers. I don't give a damn. If he doesn't clear waivers, good for him. He's going to have an opportunity. He got waived by this team because he wasn't good enough to make the initial roster, and now he has an opportunity to go somewhere else. So it's kind of a double-edged sword here. Do you want to see a guy like Brandon Johnson be picked up? No, he obviously is a quality player, would boost the depth of this receiver room, but he's obviously not good enough to make the final roster to begin with. He's going to be on the practice squad, and you're not going to see him on game days anyways. So that's why I kind of really ignore that. Eric, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I mean, they like to keep in guys, and typically when you see a team go and sign somebody there after roster cutdowns, it's a guy who has a little bit more experience too.
Yep.
Like, it's not typically a guy who has 6 catches in the NFL at the moment. Again, obviously a lot is subject to change depending on how preseason goes and everything. And I hope that if Brandon Johnson doesn't make it with the Broncos and he gets elsewhere, I hope he gets a shot because you can definitely see the talent with him. I'm just not sure at this moment that would. I'm not worried about it. It's a good question to come back and ask us there right before the final cutdowns. Yeah. Especially if Brandon Johnson goes out there and kills it during the preseason. Because a couple years ago there's another receiver that everybody was talking about. Oh, he's not going to clear waivers, and he ends up clearing waivers. Then there was who was it? Jeff Holland.
Yep.
That one year, everybody was talking about how he wasn't going to clear waivers. He cleared waivers. There was another guy, another pass rusher. There's been multiple guys over the years, so it's just at this point, we appreciate the question, Troy. We appreciate you and everything. We appreciate your support, and it's just awesome that you especially and everybody else just to continue support. It's a good question. Just ask us again here in a couple months. Yep. Chase Wellner came in to add on to that. He said, I assume Humphrey or the other Saints receiver would make the roster. Little Jordan Humphrey, I think, has a lot more hype than he deserves.
Yeah.
he's seen the field multiple times and it's just not good. Marquez Callaway is the other receiver, and he's the one who, after you have your top four, Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick, Mims, and Sutton, Marquez Callaway of that next group of four, he's the top guy I think that has a chance to make it. Just because he had such a big role there for Sean Payton in the Saints back in 2021. So I think that he's got a good shot at making it.
Well, and another thing with Marquez Callaway is he is a very, very good special teams player. And this Broncos team is like super focused on improving the special teams. And Callaway's a great gunner. He's a great blocker on special teams as well, because he plays on some kickoff coverage and punt return stuff. So that's a big thing with Callaway. I want to move forward here in just a second, but I got a quick question here. This receiver room is obviously very stacked. It's very deep. How many do you think that they keep on the opening 53? Are we keeping 6, or do they actually find room for a 7th guy?
6.
I figured you were going to go there. That's pretty well standard operating procedure. Is they usually only keep 6 guys at the wide receiver position. Sometimes they'll only keep 5, but with
you prefer 5. You prefer 5, and Denver could possibly swing 5, especially with Marvin Mims, his ability to be a returner as well. Like, you can swing only 5, and then you have Marquez Callaway there as your key special teamer, your key gunner from the position, and open up somewhere else. But I mean, I think that I do think they end up keeping 6, and I think that 6th one is going to be somebody else who can bring a little bit more explosive ability to the offense besides just Marvin Mims, because that's the only guy that they would have if they only keep 5. Which brings us to our topic today about each draft pick's role. What is Marvin Mims' role going to be in this offense? Because day 2 receivers, they typically have a little bit of a slow go in the NFL before they really get going. So it's a good question. Like, I think that he's going to be used on special teams as well. I think he's going to be the favorite to be the returner, the kick returner especially. I think he's just going to be, I don't want to say a gadget receiver. Like, that's not exactly what I'm envisioning with him, but that's the best way to put it. Kind of a gadget receiver, got to do end arounds, jet sweeps, maybe even like motion into the backfield a little bit, just because he's such an explosive playmaker, working primarily out of the slot as the 4th receiver of the group, barring injury, of course. That's kind of what I envision for him as a rookie anyways.
Well, I think a big thing with Marquez Callaway, and guys, I have a very interesting article series coming up. You're going to see a lot of this about what I'm going to say here in this article series. It's predicting the roles of these Broncos rookies. Drew Sanders' article hit today, so we're going to kind of stay away from Drew Sanders. Let everybody go check that out. We'll talk about him just a little bit. But Marvin Mims, excuse me, with his, like you said, he's such a dynamic playmaker with a dynamic, explosive receiver working out of the slot. And I agree with you 100%. I think they're going to try to use him a lot with motion to try to help dictate coverage. Like, I don't know if he's going to see the field before KJ Hamler early off. I think that Hamler, unless he gets moved, and I don't know what you would be able to get from him, maybe a late day 3 pick or something like that for a KJ Hamler. But I think Hamler is going to get an opportunity here. I think he's going to have the opportunity to really show what he is able to bring, so long as he can come back from that torn pectoral. But when Mims is on the field, you're going to see him in motion a lot. I'm very firmly predicting this because when you move him in motion, especially if you take some shots over the top and you try to get him down the field vertically, that's going to move a safety and it's going to move a linebacker. You're going to move your entire coverage. So it's going to really dictate the coverage scheme, and it's really going to help Russell Wilson out. So that, to me, is the biggest role for him. It's not necessarily, like Erick said, it's not going to be like a gadget player. It's not going to be like just a specialist receiver. I think there's a role here, and the role to me is that coverage dictation. Like, they're going to roll coverage to his side. I think that's the biggest role for Marvin Mims in year 1. And then when he fully grasps this offense, develops a little bit more as a route runner and kind of expands his horizons as a receiver in year 2, that's where you're going to see the big benefits of Marvin Mims.
Yeah, and real quick, Harold Jean came in. If he's that 5th receiver, do you think he would still do special teams? If so, it'd be Virgil and Callaway. Depending on how many, no matter how many receivers you keep, whether it be 5 or 6, your 4th, 5th, and 6th receiver always contribute on special teams. Like, they have to, either on at least one of the 4 primary units, they have to contribute it in some way. Callaway would be a gunner, both on kickoff and punt coverage. Jalen Virgil, he could potentially be a returner. But he's the fact that he would be special teams and he's so limited on it is part of why I actually lean, if Hamler can get healthy, lean Hamler being that sixth receiver if they keep that. If they keep that many. So that's just part of it there. Phil McLaughlin coming in, kind of shift in speed a little bit. He says, "Good evening, Lance and Eric. I see Pro Football Focus has Zach Allen ranked 32nd. Agree or disagree?" 32nd interior defensive lineman, 32nd players overall.
Yep. So 32nd interior defensive lineman in the NFL. They're doing a position ranking list kind of thing over the course of this. I actually got another one when we get to Riley Moss I want to throw your way as well. But yeah, so they did interior defensive lineman. Zach Allen was ranked 32nd out of 32.
I mean, I'd have to look at it and see what it is. I haven't seen it. I didn't know what they were doing. It would depend on who he's ranked over, who he's ranked under. Zach Allen is good. I'm not sure I would put him in. I mean, you're looking at what if it's interior defensive lineman, typically 3 on each team. So what, 96 total players there, and he's in the top third. I'm not sure I would agree with that. But he would definitely be in the top 50 for me. He's good. He's solid. I just question how much more room there is to grow. And there's definitely some issue. Like, he can get after the quarterback. And every time I say this, people seem to think that I'm saying he can't get after the quarterback. He's just not the best pass rusher there is. Like, he's solid. He's above average, actually. I just wouldn't say he's good or great. So I'm not sure I agree with 32nd, but wouldn't be much lower for me personally.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that. I think probably, somewhere around the 40 area. He's a top 50 player, at the position for sure. And I agree with you as well on he's a quality pass rusher, is like he has the ability to do it, but he's not a guy that you're going to like focus on and double team. He's not a guy even like a DeForest Buckner or Aaron, like obviously not Aaron Donald. He just doesn't have that explosiveness and really brings that threat. He's more of a cleanup sack guy. He can still do it, but he's not a guy that's really going to like change and dictate what offensive lines are doing and up front to really slide protection over to be that guy. And as much as I know you like Draymond Jones, I think that Zach Allen and Draymond Jones are very similar in that aspect. Draymond Jones was a great pass rusher for what he was. But was he a guy that could really take over a football game and be that true dynamic 5 technique defensive end and really just dominate up front? No, like he was good, but he wasn't. I disagree just a little bit.
You're talking about it. You're talking about this because what's difficult is even when he didn't have help, Draymond Jones still dictated what offensive linemen did to him. That's what you want out of your top pass rusher.
Yeah, that's fair.
He was the focus. It wasn't Randy Gregory. It wasn't Bradley Chubb, even when they were out there on the field. Draymond Jones was the focus of offensive linemen, and Draymond Jones still made an impact. Draymond Jones is far superior as a pass rusher to Zach Allen. Zach Allen is superior as a run defender. They're about even in overall ability because Draymond Jones' issues as a run defender bring him down so much.
Right.
Like, and I don't want to sit here and spend a lot of time on Draymond Jones because he's no longer with the Broncos.
Right.
But like, people forget that in every advanced statistical category for interior defensive lineman, he was up there with Chris Jones and Aaron Donald.
That's true.
In every single category before he got hurt. And when he got hurt, his play drops off a little bit. And then like one thing too is like, and not trying to take shots at anybody over this, is like players who stick with the Broncos, they get the excuse of injuries. But as soon as that player leaves the Broncos, that excuse goes out the window, and that player sucked at that point. And that's just something that drives me nuts with it. But anyways, we're talking about rookies. We're not talking about Draymond Jones. We appreciate the comment, Phil. I haven't seen that again. I'm not sure I'd agree with 32nd overall. But that's just my take, of course. Going back to this with wide receivers and everything again, I have an article out there talking about how much this group is. Is it good? Is it overrated? Is it still unknown? Spoiler alert, still go check out the article. You can see a lot more of my reasoning why. It's still unknown to me. And a big reason for that is because of Marvin Mims. I don't think he's going to have a role that's going to be a dictate coverage kind of role. Not as a rookie.
Right.
They're gonna slide him in there. They're gonna use Jerry Jeudy. They're gonna use Tim Patrick. They're gonna use Cortland Sutton, Greg Dulcich. They're gonna use those guys to dictate what the coverage is, and they're gonna try to do that and set it up for Marvin Mims to get a favorable matchup.
That's
he's going to be. I can't think of the actual technical term for it now, but it's the one I always refer to kind of as the exploiter. He's going to exploit the weakness in coverage that they have. And again, I don't see a huge role for him on offense because he is a rookie. I think that they want to try to rebuild some value with a couple of these older receivers, Tim Patrick, Cortland Sutton, and see what they can do off of that. And with like trading them or anything.
Right.
And then then have Marvin Mims take a step forward. He's going to have a role. It's going to be a decent role, but they're a team that's going to want to run the ball. They're going to want to go heavy with tight ends.
Mm-hmm. It's going to be 12 personnel a lot.
How often are you going to see the fourth receiver out there? Because somebody in the chat, I can't find the comment at the moment. Todd Osler says, can't really see Mims being more than the fourth receiver because barring injury, he won't be. He's going to be that fourth receiver. How big of a role do you have for a fourth receiver in an offense that is run heavy? Not much of one.
No, I don't disagree with that. And I guess let me clarify my point here just a little bit. The reason why I said that, like that coverage dictator, is just the motion and the speed aspect of it. You hit that one deep shot over the top early in the season, you get him out there, you get him the opportunity to like you said, exploit a defense and really take the top off and get that one or two good deep shots. You show that ability one time, teams are going to recognize when number whatever he is, 11, is out on the field.
But teams don't change their coverage for that unless they're a star.
Oh, I'm not trying to say that. I'm saying what you're going to see is you're going to see a slight shift to that one more side. They're going to favor that one side a little bit more because
they won't
want that. I think they will. That's just my personal
NFL teams don't though. Like that's proven. Like we've seen it over the years. NFL teams, they don't favor the side of speed unless it's like a special guy who has cemented himself over a year of football. DK Metcalf as a rookie tore it up because teams never favored that side of it until his second year because he was still a rookie and they still didn't respect him enough to sit there and change their coverage up for it. We see that we've seen that a lot. The Atlanta Falcons back when Julio Jones was in his prime and everything, Julio Jones was a coverage dictator and they had that one somewhat speedy receiver that they were able to make consistent big plays with because Julio Jones got all the attention. So they'd use the other guy on the opposite side where they would shift their coverage over to the right. They'd have him on the left side of the formation and they'd be able to take advantage of that because the safeties were favoring over on Julio Jones' side. Right. We've seen it over the years and everything. They just don't do it, not until you are a respected, like second, third year player in the NFL with multiple things of proving it. Maybe by the end of the season, we can see that with Marvin Mims, but it's not going to be a thing of where we see it like in the first 4 weeks.
No,
like
and again,
where it comes in. Like it's going to take a lot of time for that to happen,
right? Which
is why I can't sit here and say that that's going to be his role as a rookie. Because it's not going to be his role as a rookie. It's going to be because it's just not enough time.
Yeah, before you went off and tried to rip my face off here, that's what I was trying to say. Is like you're gonna see he's not gonna have a huge role as a rookie regardless. I'm trying to project into the future here a little bit because it's gonna take some time. Like you said, it's not gonna be the first play of the game we're going deep to Marvin Mims and now all of a sudden the NFL is gonna change their coverage because of him. I'm saying like as the season progresses on, you're gonna see him utilized in that motion, and I'm not saying that like you're gonna see a complete shift from the whole defense. Oh, by the way, we got to change everything we're doing to cover this one guy. No, what you're going to see is he's going to bring a guy in man coverage across, and then he's going to bail out to the backside because now he knows that he has to then get all the way back around the backside of the defense to get around to where Marvin Mims is at. If it's a man coverage dictator, that's what I'm trying to say. They're going to use him to try to identify whether it's man or zone coverage is the biggest thing. But that's also going to be utilized into the gadget aspect of the stuff that you were talking about, the jet sweeps, the backdoor screens, orbit motion, trying to get him the ball out in open space. He's not going to be a stagnant player on the line of scrimmages. I guess the biggest thing that I'm trying to get at here, they're going to want to put him in motion. He's never been great and stagnant off the line.
How many snaps on the field is he going to get though?
I'll bet you he gets 40 this year total. That's it. Like seriously, I bet you he gets 40 maybe total snaps this year.
So we can't sit here and talk about him using a guy to dictate motion if you're sitting here projecting him at 40 snaps on offense.
I don't disagree with that. Like I said, I'm not necessarily only talking about this year. I'm talking about him as a whole, as a player. That's what he's going to be for this team moving forward. As a rookie,
if he develops,
if he develops, you're absolutely correct.
Hey, here's another question on that
skill set here.
If he becomes that player, how much does that signify the failure of developing Jerry Jeudy and getting him to take the next step, or Tim Patrick or Cortland Sutton going forward? Because you want those guys to step up and be the top guy. You want those guys to be the ones dictating coverage. So if you're projecting Marvin Mims to have this kind of role for it down the road, are you projecting Jerry Jeudy to not take a step forward, or Cortland Sutton or Tim Patrick to completely fall off?
I'm projecting one of Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick to not even be on this roster come 2024.
But you still have the other one and Jerry Jeudy.
Right. Yeah,
and one of those guys are who you want to be your coverage dictator.
Right. Okay. I see where you're coming at with this. I'm just trying to project a role using the skill set that he does have. You know what I mean? Like,
he has the skill set to do that, but you don't want, like, this is going to sound bad, but it's not meant that way. You don't want Mims to be the coverage dictator because of the speed that he has.
Right.
You want Jerry Jeudy, you want Tim Patrick or Cortland Sutton, whoever is still here next year, you want them to be it, because then you can use Marvin Mims' speed to exploit the fact that they are rolling coverage away from him.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so you don't want Marvin Mims' role to be that.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. I don't know, man. I think that there's a lot of different ways that you can use a guy like Marvin Mims. And when you use him in motion and you get him moving across the line of scrimmage and changing the math a little bit, and then add that speed into it where you can take the top off, there's a way that you can utilize that. And I think that
I'm not saying that you can't.
That's all that's where I'm getting at with this, is that, like, he's not going to be a player that's just going to be standing at the line of scrimmage or like off the line of scrimmage at the slot, where he's not going to get a free release with that speed. They're gonna move him around. Like, that's the biggest thing.
He's gonna. Okay. Another way to put this is, like, again, not arguing, just kind of expanding on the conversation a little bit here. Where do you see Marvin Mims playing? I've talked about a lot about how the whole XYZ slot, like, that doesn't matter a whole lot. But if those prototypical roles, where do you see him at?
Oh, he would be an A receiver to me. Which would be a slot move motion type of a receiver. That's what I would project him as.
How often have we seen that guy be the coverage dictator?
That's a good point. Okay, you caught me on that one. You caught me on that one.
Because ideally going forward, you have Jerry Jeudy. You have Jerry Jeudy as your Z, and then you have Tim Patrick or Cortland Sutton as your X, whichever one. That's what you want ideally going forward,
right?
Just to make the math work with the financials and everything and getting the role, and then Mims and then Mims working as that slot receiver. That's what you want, which is why I brought up how you want Cortland Sutton or Tim Patrick or Jerry Jeudy to be the coverage dictator. Real quick, Phil McLaughlin comes in and says, Eric, what tier is Callaway in? He is in the second tier, which is 40 to 69% chance of making it. I've had multiple people come at me because my tiers are a little bit weird. I have 70% plus, I have 40 to 69, then I have 0 to 39%. But the reason for that middle one is because even though they're in that 40 to 69%, it doesn't mean that they're guaranteed to make it. And then often in the articles, if you guys go check it out, I'll talk about which side of the tier. Are they closer to the higher part of the tier, or are they closer to the lower part? And if I remember correctly, I put Callaway closer to that 69%. And if I actually fully remember right, I think I even mentioned how close I was to actually putting him in tier 1. Just because I think his special teams ability, at the very least, is enough to secure him a roster spot pretty much. It would be something like drastic to really, come out and bring it in. But moving on here.
Well, I want to grab this. You were talking about slot X and stuff like that. Let's grab this comment from First No Fear, jumping in early in the show, asking, speaking of, you're good. You want to pull it up, or you want me to pull it up?
I'll grab it.
Okay, so No Fear jumps in. This was early before the show even got started, saying, "Good evening, Lance, Eric, and all of Broncos country. Who should Jerry Jeudy be the full-time X with Cortland Sutton in the slot? Tim Patrick as a Z receiver. Who will be the number 1, 2, and 3?" And I think we kind of broke that down just a little bit, but I want to get at, and Eric, you made this point before we went live. We saw this comment, and I wanted to grab it. But Jerry Jeudy, when when people were talking about him playing the full-time X when he had that good 5-week stretch towards the end of the season, that wasn't necessarily true. He wasn't playing as an X. He was playing a Z role, and they were moving him all over the formation and exploiting his ability over the middle of the field.
He was
they
the
just
flanker.
made him the foot. Yeah, he was a flanker, a Z essentially, a guy that was off the line of scrimmage, moving around all over the place. They used him over the middle of the field, tried to get him running horizontally into open spaces where they could just make him the focal point of the offense. He never one time, well, I guess I can't say never one time played the X. I'm sure he did. But his primary role was as a Z move wide receiver. It wasn't anything as an X. So it's not necessarily a factual statement. And then when you come back, and no fear, and I'm not attacking you by any stretch, but you come back with this in a fun fact, you wanted us to get this as well. Jerry Jeudy had the 8th most slot yards this past season at 519. He recorded 40 receptions in the slot and had a 2.14 slot yards per route run. That's not an X role. The X will never line up in the slot. He's the weak side on the line of scrimmage receiver. That's what the X receiver position is. Jerry Jeudy, this good from the slot, why would you put him in an X role where he's stagnant on the line of scrimmage, on the backside of a play? Like that to me is it's a wonky argument. The better way to say that is he going to be wide receiver 1, 2, or 3? And I like that a little bit better. Who's going to be the main focal point of the offense at the wide receiver position? I think Jerry Jeudy should be that guy, but it's not going to be playing the X position. That's a completely different conversation for another different time. What do you think, Eric? Am I completely off base on that?
No, I mean that's part of what I agree with that fully. Is Jerry Jeudy, he was never really the X receiver. People talked about it a lot because he was lining up on the right side, and the right side is the X receiver, but that's not how it is anymore. He was the flanker receiver. Like, he was the guy out working opposite the coverage that was there, or what the receivers were doing. He was the flanker. And in the modern NFL, this is why I hate the terms X, Y, Z, A, all that stuff. Well, slot, I guess, is still relevant because who's working the slot, but X and Z receiver doesn't really matter a whole lot because they just move them. Before, it was your X was your wide receiver on your right, and Z was your wider receiver, not out wide, but your wide receiver on your left. That's how it was for years. But over the last 10, 15 years, that's changed a lot. So it doesn't really fit how it is. Jerry Jeudy, he was a Z receiver. He was your flanker if he wasn't working in the slot. And last year, he still had more, I believe, like 20 more snaps in the slot than he did working out wide at either, the left wide or the right wide receiver. So he's just best in the slot. He always has been. What stood out more is that teams changed the coverage to be more man against the Broncos because Russell Wilson was struggling more, but Jerry Jeudy was able to take a step forward a little bit and stand out and perform better. That was the bigger change there that they had. And we have a couple more super chats coming in real quick. We have James Richard coming in, says Sean Payton brought in run blocking linemen along with run blocking tight end. Denver is going to run the ball to bring out Russell's deep throw, who, believe it or not, was close to last year's best. Russell Wilson at best for all the advanced analytics on deep throw was middle of the pack. If not bottom at the bottom. He really struggled with it. There were some great plays there, but I mean his adjusted completion percentage was 10th out of 17 qualifying guys, and these are players who had at least 52 deep throws. So like he was 10th out of 17th. His NFL rating was a little bit better, where he was 7th out of 17th, but that's still more of the middle of the pack. His drop percentage was, actually among the lowest. Actually, it was the lowest of his deep shots. He had only one drop. It was 3.1%. So it wasn't great, and his touchdown to interception ratio wasn't ideal either, where he had 7 deep throws that ended in touchdown to 3 interceptions. And if you want to go by Pro Football Focus grade, he was 11th out of 17th, tied 11th. So he wasn't close to last year's best. I'm not sure if I'm misreading what you mean by this. And you're meaning that he wasn't, like he was bad last year, because that's like he was pretty bad last year with the deep throws and everything like that. But that is what they are wanting to do. They're wanting to go and be run heavy. They're going to want to use play action a little bit more than they did last year. They want to use that, pound the rock, pull the safeties up, or force defenses to go into single high, because single high is what Russell Wilson does best against.
Yep.
So your premise here isn't incorrect. They brought in all that to bring out Russell Wilson's deep throw. That is 100% correct.
Yep.
They did everything to sit there and dictate coverage better, pull that safety down, and open up those deep shots. And then he also adds another $2 donation saying Sean also brought in Pirine. He did. Hopefully he's healthy. Hopefully he can handle being the top guy there for a little while. I saw a couple people somebody asked about how many wide running backs I think they keep. Pure running backs 3, 4 if you include the fullback.
Yeah.
For me, I always include fullbacks with the tight end group, which also I think is 3 plus the fullback.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, you're still exactly right here, James. We appreciate the donations, and thank you for joining us tonight. It's been a while since I've seen your name in here, unless I just happened to miss you over the last time.
Yeah, he comes back in and says Russell threw 26 deep throw for 1,008 yards. So it was efficient when it actually hit, but it wasn't efficient all the time. That's the big thing that I think Erick's trying to get at there. Like when he did hit the throws, they went for big gains and they were actually very effective, but it wasn't efficient all the way all the time like it has been in the past. This is widely considered, and I'm not coming at you, James. I do appreciate you for jumping in here and joining us and all of your support as well. But this last season was widely considered Russell Wilson's worst season since he was a rookie. Like he literally was the worst player that we have ever seen from Russell Wilson, period, point blank, end of discussion. Last year, the deep throw was the one thing where he seemingly was the most effective, but again, it wasn't efficient. And I want to see him take this big step forward. Go ahead, Erick.
James, can you cite your source on that? Because Pro Football Focus has them actually better than that. Where he actually completed 31 of 78 attempts for a 39.7 completion percentage for just over 1,100 yards on shots 20 plus.
Is that 20 plus?
But that is still middle of the pack. His completion percentage is 7th out of 17th. His attempts are 3rd. He had the 3rd most attempts out of it, and he had the 7th highest completion percentage. Regular completion percentage. Adjusted completion percentage, again, that is 10th because adjusted accounts for drops, which while he only had 1, Josh Allen had 5 deep shots dropped. Mm-hmm. So he had a higher drop percentage, which increases his completion percentage pretty significantly. Mm-hmm. So curious where you got those stats from, because they don't align with what Pro Football Focus has. And Pro Football Focus's stats are pretty good. Grades you can miss me on. Stats I like. And real quick, to transition this over here to Drew Sanders. Talking about Frank Clark and about how many sacks he can get. One thing I like about, I don't know if you knew this, Lance, but one thing I really like about Pro Football Focus's stats, especially when it comes to sacks, they don't include half sacks, right? You know that, right?
Yep.
Do you know what they do instead? The sack goes to who gets there first.
Okay.
Between the two guys who get credit for a half sack,
the person who touched him first gets credit for the full sack.
The person who touched him first. So Frank Clark, with that in mind, 9 sacks last year, 5 sacks the year before, 9 sacks, 13, 14, 10, 12, then 4 his rookie season. And that is, again, Pro Football Focus is taking out half sacks going to the guy who was there. So that is something to keep in mind. I think he gets after the quarterback pretty well, and he gets after them quickly. Finishing isn't always his strong suit, which is why his sack totals from like ESPN and Pro Football Reference are significantly lower, because he has a lot of half sacks in there because he struggles to finish. But with the pass rushers the Broncos have, it should still be a high count by Pro Football Reference or Pro Football Focus, because he should be able to get there pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Which brings us to Drew Sanders and his projected goal. And this is something that we've talked about a lot, and we don't need to go super in depth about it because we went super in depth about it last week. Mm-hmm. And just thing is there's always this talk about, is it going to be an edge rusher? Is it going to be a linebacker? Sean Payton's made it clear. Like, he's had multiple interviews and everything or questions about it. He's a linebacker. He's going to be used as a linebacker. He is their prototypical Mike linebacker that in the vision that he used DeMario Davis down in New Orleans. That is how they see Drew Sanders.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun to see what they actually do with him. I think early on, and guys, I'm going to pull up and share this article, so hopefully it doesn't glitch me out, and hopefully it actually works the right way. Maybe. So there we go. Okay. over milehighhuddle.com, guys, right here in the middle here, projecting Drew Sanders' role on this defense. I wrote this article last night. It published this morning. Go check it out. I'm going to talk a little bit about this, and I want to expand on it a little bit. With obviously with Josie Jewell and you've got Alex Singleton in tow, there's going to be a kind of a limited role for Drew Sanders early, unless, and I put this at the bottom of the page, and make sure you guys go check this out, unless for some reason the Broncos want to move on from Josie Jewell. They would save $4.8 million against the salary cap. They would eat, I believe, $2.2 million in dead money, but they would move on from a guy who has been very maligned for a Broncos player, despite being a very good player at the position due to his high football IQ. Now, Eric, something tells me that I don't think that that's necessarily going to happen unless they can figure out a way to trade for somebody to bring him in, because this is a great opportunity for a guy that's young at the position. He's only played one full season as a full-time starter. That was his last season at Arkansas, where he had 103 total tackles, 9.5 sacks, primarily being used as a blitzer in the A-gap as a run game defender there, but he also showed some ability in coverage. To me, I think Josie Jewell needs to stick around a little bit and really kind of show this kid the ropes and try to just ingrain some of that football knowledge, some of that football IQ that Josie Jewell possesses at the linebacker position into a guy who I think is going to he projects to be a star player at the NFL level. Eric, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I know that there's been a lot of conversations about moving on from Jewell. I don't think they should personally. I think that it's still a little bit, if this is a team that's trying to turn it around, I think this is a good year for them to just kind of, it's the same thing with like trading Cortland Sutton and Garrett Bowles and all that. It's a good year to kind of keep everything together a little bit and see what you can do, and then make those changes this next offseason if things don't work out. Like if Russell Wilson doesn't take that step forward, if Garrett Bowles doesn't show he's worth the cost, which I don't think he can do, and if Justin Simmons, depending on what he do, Cortland Sutton, all these players are talking about being let go. Just Josie Jewell's one of them. I mean, he's a free agent after this year, so it's a natural way to move on for it. I think you keep him, but it's a good way to get him on the field. You can still get Drew Sanders on the field in certain situations. He's a pressure player, which is what Sean Payton has said about him. You can use him to, attack the A gaps a little bit, because all the talk about his edge, he doesn't have the build profile to be a full-time edge. So I think keeping him at linebacker is the right way. That's kind of his role here. Couple questions here. Don't really want to go back to Russell Wilson, but couple questions here I want to grab. Keith Brugman, who's a good friend of the show. How many quarterbacks Russell's age or older had a good year last year? Well, that's difficult, because when you go and you look at quarterbacks his age, along with them who took, a good sizable amount of drafts snaps, you end up with 6, where Russell Wilson was the second to worst one, ahead of just Matt Ryan. So it's difficult because it's a low sample size, because quarterbacks his age, like a lot of them aren't there anymore in the NFL. It's really been getting handed over to the younger guys, to the Josh Allens, the Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrows, Trevor Lawrence. Like, it's getting handed over. We're in that point where there's not much old guys, and we're hitting that younger group. That's kind of the stage we're at now. But Russell Wilson, I mean, if you're looking at guys his age, he was the second to worst one. And James Richard comes in. It was Russell's worst year. However, Denver had 22 on IR, 12 of which were starters. It wasn't just Russell, though it was his worst. No, and I think a lot of people get confused with this when I say it wasn't just Russell Wilson, and I have always tried to make that very clear. I have never said it was only just Russell Wilson. I think his impact on it was a lot bigger than what a lot of people realize, because the offense was created in duo with what he wanted to do, and Nathaniel Hackett just catering to him every step of the way, which is a whole other issue. Nathaniel Hackett couldn't say no to him. He just bent over backwards for Russell Wilson every single step of the way, which is part of why he got fired. The whole office thing, like on the field, yes, the injuries hurt. The lack of a running game hurt, because you had such a crappy offensive line coach that completely changed up how to teach techniques to these offensive linemen, and they hated it. And you had coaching guys on the coaching staff who were making decisions based off of what players were paid compared to who was doing better. There were so many issues last year, which is why, like, Russell Wilson, like, he gets this year. He's got to step up, because last year wasn't great. Everybody can admit that. there were mistakes that are just on him that you can't put on anybody else. Missing a wide open receiver standing in front of him when when the offensive line was completely split, misreading the coverage pre-snap from man to zone and throwing to the zone beater when it was man coverage.
Very clearly man coverage. Very clearly man coverage.
There was a lot of mistakes that are just on Russell Wilson, but the whole issue with the team last year wasn't just Russell Wilson's fault.
No.
We're going to move on from Russell Wilson. Like, we don't need to rant about it. Going to give him a shot this year. I hope he can turn it around because that's the best thing for the Broncos.
Mm-hmm.
But the last rookie to really get into, because JL Skinner, it all depends on when he's coming back healthy.
Mm-hmm.
I think if he's healthy by training camp, he could earn himself a good role. But I think this year's kind of going to be more of a, we're going to wait and see develop kind of thing. And then next year, we'll see what you can do and compete for that third safety spot. And then Alex Forsyth, maybe he can end up winning the starting center job. But I mean, what role is there for a center except for being the center? It's not a very thing like it is with wide receiver or linebacker or safeties or corner. Your center is the center.
I get that. I did want your opinion on that. Let's just touch on this briefly, and then we'll go to Riley Moss because
wait. Real quick. Dylan Von Ark says Kenny Pickett had an office as well. Yes, but the reasoning is completely different. They gave Kenny Pickett an office, the coaching staff did, to help him be close to them while he is learning the offense. They have made that very clear. It wasn't a thing of him demanding it or anything like that. They gave it to him so he could be closer to the coaching staff and just basically poke his head out and ask a question if he had a question about picking up the offense. That, to me, is a significant difference between it. To me, still, it wasn't so much a thing of the office, really. It was the fact that there were players on the team who had an issue with it in Denver, and then it just always got shrugged off. That's the bigger issue to me. Russell Wilson had office, teammates had issues with it, and it just got shrugged off.
Last point. I want to move on. I got to get this off my chest. The players had an issue with it because it was on the coach's level of the facility. It was on the second floor. The players are all on the first floor. That's where the locker room's at. Everyone's on the first floor of the facility. All of the offices for the coaches are on the second floor, and then the executives have the top floor. That's how that building is laid out, right? Yeah. Russell Wilson's office was right down the hall from Nathaniel Hackett's. They wore out a freaking walking path going back and forth, trying to collaborate on this offense that was an absolute disaster. Let's just be real here. That was the problem that I had with it. I don't give a damn if you have an office that's right close to the meeting rooms and stuff like that, where everybody's there like, hey, I got a quick question for you, whatever. The players had an issue with it because it was on the second floor where all the coaches were supposed to be, and Russell Wilson would bring them up there to go watch film. That wasn't a problem. You could go to the meeting rooms to be able to do that. You didn't need to have your own office next to Nathaniel Hackett's. That was the problem. James jumping back in says, you guys are awesome. I'm going to crack a cold one. Please do. Crack one for us. It'd be awesome for you to do that. And, dude, again, I know we sound harsh. I know we get a little bit animated. We go back and forth with each other, and we attack people in the chat. We give our honest, bold, deep dive opinions on everything. We're not coming at you as a person. We're not trying to make you feel dumb or anything like that. We definitely appreciate your support, and we'd love to have the conversation with you guys. It's why I really like to do these live shows, because we have the opportunity to actually have a discussion with everybody that wants to come in and join in and ask us these questions. So James, thank you so much, man. It's like 5 super chats you dropped on us tonight. Have your cold one. Enjoy it. Enjoy the rest of the show. And thank you once again. We definitely appreciate that. I want to go back to Alex Forsyth quickly, because I got a chance to watch a little bit of his tape, but I haven't really gotten a chance to really break him down. I know a lot of players, or a lot of people in the scouting community, specifically guys like Duke Manyweather, and who's a very well-respected offensive line coach, guy that a lot of professional guys still go to for O-line masterminds with Joe Marino. Duke Manyweather said that he was an absolute steal at the center position. Emory Hunt, who's a widely regarded scout, said that Alex Forsyth was the best center in this class. He should have been a second-round pick, even over John Michael Schmitz or guys like Joe Tippmann. There's other people. Joe Marino's another guy. I believe Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl was a really big Alex Forsyth fan.
He was.
Yep. I want to know your thoughts on this, because if there's a lot of guys that like those are, I just dropped you 5 or 6 names that are at like the upper echelon of the scouting community, especially in the offensive line position, that are all saying Alex Forsyth is a steal for this Broncos team. What is your opinion?
Well, first of all, Gary Palmer coming in says, glad to catch you guys live.
Sure, BLP.
DBFL hashtag Buckham. Thank you, Gary. We appreciate that. And I just want to say, I just want to wish you a super happy late birthday. I'm not on Facebook a whole lot, and I saw somebody post, and it was like already a couple days, and that was a couple days ago. I hope you had a good birthday, Gary.
Yeah.
Appreciate you. Hope you're going to be able to make it to the meet and greet. It was great meeting you last year as well. And then James Richard again comes in. Denver's offensive best feature last year was our run game. Sean has only enhanced that. I'm not sure I would agree with that. Denver's run game last year was absolutely atrocious. It picked up a little bit as the season went on, especially when they made some changes. But last year's running game was just absolutely terrible. So many issues with the offensive line, so many issues with play designs, like just so many issues with it.
Sequencing. Sequencing was so terrible. I will say, let me.
The last thing I want to say on this is that talking about the best feature on the offense last year, to me, is like talking about the shiniest turd.
Yeah,
like it was all bad.
Yeah, the one that's not quite as slimy and gross as all the rest of them. But when Latavius Murray became the starter, and they moved on from Melvin Gordon, and they threw in Marlon Mack in there for a little bit. Chase Edmonds had a game where he was at least okay. But for the most part, when Latavius Murray took over, and you started to see some of the longer runs on the season after he really started to be not really the bell cow, because that's not what he was, but the starting running back, the guy that got the bulk of the share, like the bulk of the carries and stuff, it did get better then. But overall, the run game was really not good. Like you said, it's like arguing over which one is the prettiest turd. So on Forsyth, I got to get your thoughts on Forsyth really fast. Then we'll go into Riley Moss. I got a good one here for Riley Moss.
Go ahead.
Well, I wanted your thoughts on Forsyth really fast, because
I've been talking about a lot about how he should have gone higher than he was.
Mm-hmm.
Only reason why he went that late was because he was dealing with the lingering hamstring issue throughout the whole draft process. That's why he didn't go to the Senior Bowl. It's why he did very little at the combine. Like, he was dealing with the lingering hamstring issue, and teams got mad because they're like, "Oh, you can still do this," and he didn't want to. Mm-hmm. So teams dropped him for that. And it ended up being a good pick for the Broncos. Now it's time for him to go out there and develop and show what he can do, and show and answer all this praise that he got by those guys you named, who had him as a top 100, top 150 pick, top 64 pick with a couple of them. Mm-hmm. Now he's got to go out there and show it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is can he do that?
Right. What, just off the top of your head, do you think he actually beats out Lloyd Cushenberry, or is it just the 1 year too soon?
I think he's got a better chance than people think. Sean Payton it's not like previous coaching staffs that we've had where they've been hesitant to put rookies out there in a starting role right away. Mm-hmm. Sean Payton doesn't care.
Right.
If you're a rookie, he doesn't care. If you win the job, you're going to start. Mm-hmm. So that's, he has a shot. He has a good shot. If this was the coaching staff last year, or even Vic Fangio's coaching staff, or any coaching staff that prefers to not just hand things to rookies, then obviously not. I'd go Lloyd Cushenberry. But it is a thing of, we have a coach who doesn't mind starting rookies.
Yeah, James, I'm not gonna pull your comment up. I see it. It's a super chat here. Mythbusters did prove that it's possible to do that, but let's move on here. So sorry, that actually tickles my fancy a little bit, and I could nerd out about Mythbusters. Anyways, let's go to Riley Moss here. Obviously, the Broncos, they have Pat Surtain, who's a top 3 cornerback in the NFL. He's not number 3. He's probably not even number 2. He's most likely the best corner in the game right now. On the other side of that, you got Damari Mathis, who played well as a rookie, and I do have to qualify that as a rookie. He played well. He was not great by any stretch of the imagination last season. He grew into his role, played well enough as a starter down the stretch, and showed a lot of promise. And I want to give him the credit that is due there. But they also went out and made it a priority to trade up, move on from a future 3rd-round pick to go and get Riley Moss out of Iowa. And Moss is an incredible athlete. This dude is smooth. He's fluid, but he doesn't necessarily fit the prototypical skill set of what a Vance Joseph defense likes to do schematically. Vance Joseph likes to run a lot of press man coverage, and Riley Moss didn't show that at Iowa. It was not a part of the Iowa scheme. They play a lot of match quarters and deep cover 2 stuff where you're playing off the ball, playing off the line of scrimmage, typically about 8 to 10 yards off the line of scrimmage. So Riley Moss never really had the opportunity to display his abilities as a press man coverage cornerback. Now, Eric, with the lower half fluidity, the change of direction ability, and just the overall athleticism with Riley Moss, is that something that can translate with him to be able to play in this system? Or you're looking to maybe move him off of the, get him away from the boundary, move him back and play him as a safety in this defense?
I try not to hold what people don't show in college against them.
Right, yeah.
There's been multiple. I mean, Patrick Surtain, he's a good example. He didn't play a lot of off coverage, and it led to us questioning it. I had other questions about it that led to it, but he came in and he did quite well at it. He's shown to be a lot better when playing press, but he was more than capable. The quickness, the intelligence, like that, made up for it. Well, playing press, maybe Moss shows a little bit more tenacity, ferocity. Maybe he shows a little bit more upper body strength. Maybe he stands out and he can do it. And handle it. I think ultimately he's going to end up a safety in the NFL, but he is a guy who I think is going to have a long NFL career, at the very least as a backup and special teams guy. His role is absolutely impossible for me to predict right now or even make a guess at, because even the coaching staff, they've been like, it depends on what he does if we move him back to safety this year or not. We're going to give him a try at corner first. So he could end up as a safety this year.
Yeah.
I think he showed enough at the Senior Bowl to work as an outside corner. I question if he can do it in this scheme. I would be more curious if he can work in the slot in this scheme, where it's going to be a little bit more off coverage, where that fluidity is a little bit more needed. That's my question. Can he handle a slot? Because I think Mathis should be fine playing outside in this system.
Yeah, I do as well. Because if you go back to watch what Pittsburgh does, the Pittsburgh Panthers at University of Pittsburgh, where Damari Mathis came from, they played a lot of press in Pittsburgh as well. They do like to play a lot of cover 4 stuff, but it is press. They are closer to the line of scrimmage within 5 yards where you can get your hands on and get mixed up a little bit with that. So Damari Mathis has at least shown that. And I don't want to say I'm holding it against Riley Moss that like he didn't see that. So I don't know. It's just, I want to see it first. I'm not going to say he can't play press man because he didn't do it in college. No, that's not how this works. I want to see the stuff that you can do and how good you are at it, and then be able to project that role. I just have that question. Is he going to be able to do it? I want to go back. You brought up a very intriguing discussion here in terms of the slot cornerback, because again, going back to Pro Football Focus and their positional rankings, they have a piece up right now. It just, I believe, went up this morning, talking about slot cornerbacks, doing the top 10 slot cornerbacks in the game according to last season in NFL passer rating allowed from the slot coverage only. You had to qualify with at least 100 snaps played in the slot to make this list. And the Broncos actually have 2 guys on this list, folks. Number 7 on the list is Essang Bassey, who played 126 slot cover snaps, allowed a 62.8 NFL passer rating, only allows 8 receptions for 73 yards, no touchdowns, and his 15.8 snaps per reception ranked first amongst qualified corners. Although he isn't projected to be a starter, he's proven to be more than a solid rotational piece in the secondary, plus a quality player as a special teamer as well. And then K'Wan Williams, who played 342 snaps, which is the most of any of these players on this list. NFL passer rating allowed was 74.4. He was number 8. So the Broncos had number 7 and number 8 in terms of NFL passer rating allowed slot coverage cornerbacks in the NFL according to last season. So, Eric, I know that you and I disagree a lot with Essang Bassey. I think that he gets a lot more criticism than he actually deserves. And I'm not trying to use this metric. It's passer rating, guys. Like, it's not one of the shiniest statistics to bring in terms of advanced analytics to prove a point here. But the Broncos have 2 quality players there. Is Riley Moss going to kick Essang Bassey off this roster once and for all? Because he's bounced around the NFL the last couple of seasons.
You're just asking about kicking Essang Bassey off the roster? who played 126 coverage snaps.
Oh, no, that was 126 coverage snaps in the slot. He had over 200 coverage snaps last season.
126 coverage slots, 126 snaps, snaps in the slot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he can easily get kicked off the roster.
I did this to trigger
like,
you.
Come on, sample size here, buddy. Like, come on.
I know. I had to do it just because. So I read this list and I'm like, Asang Bassi, we're talking tonight, and I know Erick does not like Asang Bassi. It's almost like he kicked your puppy when you were a small child or something.
He's not good. That's what it is. It's not. He's not good.
I'm playing with you, dude. I'm playing with you. I did find that pretty interesting though. That given the smaller sample size, he still did have at least enough success. And 15.6, I believe, was snaps per reception allowed, is still a fairly decent number. It was a number one number on that list. So that is at least something you can kind of hang your hat on in terms of his ability to play decently in coverage. Now, the problem is he's not fast enough to hang up with receivers. Like it better be a quick pass where he can get his hands on the football, because he's not a player that you want to be out there all the time by any stretch of the imagination, but like at all. And K'Wan Williams is spectacular, but
okay.
I don't know.
On this note, since you made me pull it up, 126 snaps in the coverage, 170 total. Okay. Over half of that came in 3 games. Mm-hmm. Indianapolis, who the hell were they doing on offense? Like, that was the ugliest Thursday night football game we've ever seen.
Ever.
So he gets boosted because he had it been to play and basically start against the Indianapolis Colts, against the Las Vegas Raiders, who their receiving weapons were one outside guy, their tight end, and their running back, who barely targeted the slot, and Baltimore, who barely targeted the slot. That was nearly most of it. And then you have the Chargers, where he was absolutely terrible in the season finale. Over 50%, almost 75% of his snaps came in those 4 games.
Well, and if you go
sample size, and it's just not about the total of snaps, it's who they came against. Asang Bassi's not good.
I did this to trigger you, and it so totally worked. But also add some more context to that. The reason why Asang Bassi saw such a big boost in playing times week 4, 5, and 6 of last season. What happened? K'Wan Williams broke his freaking hand, guys. He broke his hand in week 4. He didn't get to play a lot because he had a broken goddamn hand. Like, Asang Bassi got that opportunity because K'Wan Williams was hurt. Like, that's point blank period how that all went. I did it to trigger you. And it worked. So thank you for that. You definitely allowed me to get my laugh here. Anyways, Riley Moss in the slot. I do like this idea. Because of that, the off the ball ability where you're going to have some space, be able to sink your hips down and use that change of direction ability. That's a very intriguing idea to me. And he played fairly decently in the slot when he had some opportunities at the Senior Bowl, I believe. And then also at Iowa, he had some opportunity playing in the slot, and he was still a fairly decent player. I want to expand on one last thing here before we get out of here. I know we're over our time limit, but you said something about Riley Moss having a long career, if nothing else, as a quality backup, a core special teams player, just one of those dudes that you want to have on your roster. And I'm going to reference our group chat. I was talking with James and Carl the other day, and I said something to the effect of, because Carl brought up something about players most likely to get a second contract. And I said, it's probably going to be Drew Sanders because I think he's going to turn into a star. But my next guy would be Riley Moss, because I think that out of all of the players that the Broncos brought in this season in terms of the draft and the undrafted free agents and whatnot, Riley Moss is that one dude where you just know he's going to be a good football player. He's going to be a dude that is just a quality player, a guy that's going to be a bottom level of the roster guy. He may not be a starter at the NFL level, but he's going to be the one safest pick that the Broncos took this last season. What do you think?
Yeah. He's going to be my one safest pick of it. But real quick, couple things here before we get out of here, because we're going to have to rush out of here. James Richard comes in with another $10 donation. Thank you, James. We appreciate that.
Thank you, man.
Randy Gratishar, 127 tackles for 10 seasons in a row. Never even missed a game for those 10 seasons. No Hall of Fame, WTF, 12 picks, 6 of which were touchdowns. I need MHH to bring this to attention. We have a lot over the years. It is absolutely just a travesty that Randy Gradishar is not in the freaking Hall of Fame. It's absolute bonkers. It's absolute cow manure. It's just absolutely atrocious. Michael Ronquillo says no love for JL Skinner yet. We quickly touched on it with his injury, even though he's ahead of schedule. We didn't want to take a lot of time, especially when we're at that point. We were almost 45 minutes in. So we just kind of talked about it. Maybe he can carve out a role if he's healthy by training camp, but it's just a matter of he's got to get back to healthy. And even then, it's got to be bringing him around. I think next year is going to be a bigger year for him.
I do
as well. And then this whole thing, Patrick Surtain as a punt returner.
No.
Here's how it is. Will we see Patrick Surtain as a punt returner this year? I highly doubt it. What will be the situation we see him as a punt returner? The Marvin 5 or 6 guys they'll look at before him all got hurt in the game.
Yep.
That's it. Dylan Von Ark says it perfectly. He's in a case of emergency, break the glass guy. That is every single player that you have on the roster that can return punts or kicks above him has gotten hurt in the game. That is the only way he is. And Patrick Surtain went to Sean Payton and he said, if needed, I'm willing to do it. Like, are we going to see it? No. It is a conversation that came up last year. I thought it was dumb then. I think it's kind of silly now. It doesn't matter. We're not going to see it happen. Like, it's just not. They'll turn to Russell Wilson returning punts before Patrick Surtain. You're not going to risk your team's best player on special teams.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And is there a potential possibility that maybe they throw him out there and say, just go catch the football? You know, Marvin Mims is down right now. We don't have a guy that we can really trust. Like, and honestly, Benjamin Flores jumping in here, and new name to me. So thank you for jumping in, Ben. We appreciate you. Right at the bell here. Glad we could grab this comment saying, I honestly think that Sean Payton was just entertaining himself and giving the media BS to cover with the Surtain as a returner idea. He's just playing with people. I don't necessarily agree with that, but I don't disagree with it either. I mean, like Erick said, you got to have an emergency contingency plan for somebody to go out there and be able to do it. Surtain had that ability in high school. Apparently, he was an electric punt returner as a high schooler, but he's the best cornerback in the NFL, guys. You're not putting him back there to be your primary punt returner. You might see it twice this season, maybe, just for a spark late in the game because you need somebody out there that's dynamic with the football in his hands. And even then, I doubt it happens. I'm just throwing out the hypothetical here, so don't rip my face off for the 15th time tonight, damn it. Anyways, with that, guys, and I want to call him out so bad, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to let it go. Idiot over at the stand. Anyways, with that, guys, we're going to have to get out of here quickly. You all stay safe and take care. Follow us on Twitter by finding me at @LanceS_MHH, for Erick at Erick Trickel. Also, guys, make sure you're following at Mile High Huddle. Get over on Facebook. Get on over to the Mile High Huddle super fan group. Great way to follow all of our conversations, all of our stuff regarding the Broncos. Like, subscribe, share, do everything you guys can do to get us in front of as many Broncos fans as possible, because without your guys' support, we couldn't do what we do best, which is cover your Denver Broncos. With that, guys, for Erick Trickel, I am Lance Sanderson. You all stay safe. Take care. Have a great Father's Day, everybody. Go ahead, Erick.
Yeah. I was going to say, I hope all you fathers out there have a wonderful Father's Day.
Yeah, have a great Father's Day. Stay safe, everybody. Please don't go out and be dumb. James Richard jumping at the very end, crash at the very end of the show. It's a trademark thing. Okay, thanks, James. Again, man, thank you so much for your support, dude. We definitely appreciate that. Anyways, guys, we'll see you guys same time, same place at next week, Friday at 6 p.m. on Dove Valley Deep Divers. Thanks, guys.